So hello everyone, and today Ashley and I are welcoming Sunita on our podcast. She's a friend of mine who I met years ago in Richmond. She's a teacher, but also a teacher trainer now as well. And today we will try to cover everything from cultural appropriation, how can you bring yogic philosophy into your everyday life, and how can you, where yoga is headed today. So even if you're a practitioner or you want to do a teacher training or thinking of doing one, I think this episode will be good for you. So welcome, Sunita, on the podcast. Would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you, Melinda and Ashley, for having me. I'm very excited to be part of your podcast and being part of all the wonderful things that you both have been doing on this podcast. So it's really special to be here with you both and to kind of share my thinking and my thoughts around yoga. So the question was, what was your question? My journey to yoga? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so introduce yourself or what you do.
Yeah. So Sunita Devi that's who I am, and I teach yoga and have been in teaching for I think 10 years maybe, something along those lines, and then probably practicing for 20 odd years or so. So kind of yoga's been very much part of my life. And then so when I kind of decided to train as a yoga teacher, I did it for myself. I think I say that because I think underneath it, I secretly wanted to be a teacher, but I think I was protecting myself going, I'm doing it for myself. But underneath, I think there was always an inner teacher that kind of wanted to come out. So once I trained, I never, when I trained, I had an amazing job that I loved. And so I in terms of teaching, I always saw yoga as my second career. So I was I've got this job in a law firm and I do learning and development and I grow people, and then alongside that I had my second career, which was my teaching, so working full time. And then I used to teach 2 or 3 classes a week alongside that for a period of time, and then eventually the full-time job, my time there was shrinking and my yoga stuff was getting bigger and bigger, and then I kind of left my job all on good terms. I haven't got the story about being burnt out, or hating my corporate job. I absolutely loved it, and I would go back again into that space. So I really loved it, I really enjoyed it, and then I took redundancy with them because it came to a point when my role I'd done what I could do within that role and with the company I was working with, and then so I kind of just organically landed in yoga and started to teach full time across London, and then from there I just had lots of different opportunities come my way, and then started to do workshops, do retreats, and that sort of led me into doing teacher training. So now fast forward, I work for Hot Pod Yoga, and I give them kind of half of my time with them, and then the other half of my time I'm still kind of Sunita Devi yoga and my self-employed business. So I've got a really lovely balance of being employed, and for those that you are self-employed, back on holidays, paid holidays and all of that. There's so many wonderful benefits, but being with an amazing company that I really believe in and I really enjoy working with. And then I have my other side, which is teaching yoga in different studios, doing workshops and doing retreats. So I'm very busy in the world of yoga and I love it a lot. So has that given you a bit of an intro?
Yeah.
So okay.
Do you work full time, or sorry, you work part-time as an employee for Hot Pod Yoga?
Yeah, I do. So I give them kind of 15 days a month.
Yeah.
And so my role within working for Hot Pod Yoga is I work on their teacher training. So I lead on their teacher training with other leads. You had lovely Elodie that joined you. So Elodie is part of the lead. So I do that with Hot Pod, run and manage their teacher training. But also my role within Hot Pod is not only just the teacher training, but it's to support the yoga teachers. And that is all the teachers that work and teach in their franchise. And they're really big on growing and developing and supporting their teachers, so that we're constantly upskilling teachers. Because, you know, you come out of a 200-hour and you've got a very like foundational level of knowledge. And then you get really looked after in it. Well, a good teacher training will look after you. You get nurtured and you get held in that space. And then all of a sudden, it's like the blanket just removes and you're out in the big world. And, you know, you're in this safe environment on a teacher training, and everyone's in the yoga bubble and everything's really great. And then you come out and it's like, oh, what do I do? Like, I had someone come in and they had all these injuries. I didn't know how to deal with them. Or I had somebody else come in, they've never practiced yoga. I didn't know how to teach a beginner. So there's so many different things that start to come out after, once you start teaching. And so my role is at Hot Pod is to like put programs together where we can support our teachers, that they feel fully like equipped and supported. And I think that in itself is really special for Hot Pod, because, and you will know this, like working for studios, you're self-employed, and so are our Hot Pod teachers, but we try to offer support around that, so they feel like they are always like growing and learning. And, you know, my whole background is learning and development. Like at the heart of everything I do is I grow individuals. At the heart of everything is people. And whether when I was in the law firm, everything I was doing was around growing people, trainee lawyers. Now what I'm doing is, you know, still people, but I'm training yoga teachers. So that for me is what literally lights me up, you know, to be able to inspire or uplift people, that they can like kind of go out and like do their thing, man, in the world, and feel kind of empowered like to do that. So that's and I think the role in working with Hot Pod really kind of especially when I'm on a teacher training, like I always say to the students, I'm like your biggest cheerleader, you know, like, come on, you've got this. Because nobody does it when you come out of that teacher training unless you've got a tight network around you, you know, unless you've got a tight group of teachers around you that support you, or you're with studios that will hold you, support you. Otherwise it's not there. Yeah. You know, so and people that come to teacher trainings, a lot of them feel like they're not good enough to be a teacher. And like, you know, growing up for me, like and this comes from how I was like brought up and stuff, you know, like I didn't necessarily have lots of like people around me that were my biggest cheerleaders when I was growing up. And so I feel strongly about being able to offer that to people that have that element of doubt. Like I'll capture it and I'm like, I'm going to just get that, and we're going to change that, and we're going to work through this, and you're going to do your thing. Because everyone has an inner teacher inside of them. If there's a desire to do a teacher training, I hope, if there's a desire to do a teacher training, there is something inside of you. And sometimes that can get really clouded by like self-doubt. Kind of move through the cloud and kind of bring in a bit of light or a bit of sunshine into that, then I kind of feel like I'm doing what I should be doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was thinking when you said you worked in like development and education and law, like that's such a great skill set to now being applied to teaching teachers and encouraging them to grow. Because we've talked about this in other podcasts about like 200 hours teacher training is just the beginning, where then you're released into the world and you're kind of like, I don't even know where to start. I do mentoring too, and the teacher training group that or that just finished that I'm mentoring, they're saying these same things. Like, I don't know if I'm good enough to be a teacher. I don't know where to start. Like, how do I even approach a studio? And it is really nice to be able to bring your experience and guide people along the way, because I didn't really have much of that. When I came out, just kind of figured it out. I did have support from my second teacher training in terms of theming and sequencing that continues to this day, but that real world navigation of becoming a yoga teacher.
Yeah.
It's super important, especially now. I feel like it's just exponentially more difficult, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's so, you know, like in the space of time that I've been teaching, it's completely different now to train as a teacher. And, you know, when I trained back then, I got a job, literally, I trained with a studio and I got a job straight away with the studio. And as soon as I got my foot in the door to do that, that just led into another door opening, another door opening, another door opening. But there was a few other things that I did in order for those doors to open as well. But for teachers now to get their foot in the door, it's difficult. Yeah. It's really difficult because they don't have the experience. Yeah. So therefore, then what you need is you need to have the drive, the desire to kind of roll up your sleeves, and you have to kind of work for it. And I think that, like, some people want the title of a yoga teacher, but don't want to put the work in, right? So, and I'm like, no. And it's interesting because I have got a very strict side to me, in the sense that I'm very kind of like, if you want this, you need to put the work in, you know. And I think it's interesting. I think just seeing, like, people can be quite like, hey, I want to do the training, but don't want to put the effort in. I'm like, I need to see effort. And you know, and that, you know, that's how I got all the doors open, because I did put the work in, and I did put the effort in. And there's a lot of yoga teachers out there. So if you're new, it's like, well, how do you want to, like, stand out from everybody else, you know? But it also requires self-belief. Also requires self-belief. If that's not there, if you're doubting yourself, if you don't believe in yourself, how is anyone else going to believe in you? Yeah. You know, but initially when you start out, you do have to put effort in. You have to show up. You have to turn up. You have to get your face known in studios. You have to make contacts. You have to connect. And you might do all of that and still not get a teaching role from them. You know, but then you go to the next place and you keep going. And then you go, no, okay, maybe I'm going to find a community centre. Maybe I'm going to set up my own class. And what we didn't have, and what we've got now, is we've got the beauty of online, right? So you create your own online class. You don't need to be under the umbrella of the studio. And again, that still, again, requires work from you. You might teach one person on Zoom. You might switch on Zoom and you go, there's nobody there, you know, and that's okay. Next week you show up again and you go, no one's come. Okay, maybe I need to promote it more. Maybe I need to talk about it a little bit more. You show up again and you might think, maybe I need to change the time. Maybe I need to change the date. So you're constantly, like, evolving, and you don't give up in that first phase, you know? And like, I just think we give up sometimes really easily. Yeah. You know?
But I think also new students or new teachers have to see that they don't see the work we put in throughout the years. Because I have been like, no one turned up to a class on Zoom or anything. I have done that. Like, I went to a class and no one turned up. And it's just not taking it personally, just keep going with it. Especially nowadays when where the economy is going and everyone's having a little bit less money for spending on your yoga, and yoga is getting so expensive. People they're gonna cut out is probably their yoga or their membership in studios, because they can't afford. So I think you're just not taking it personally and just keep going and plowing through hard times.
But the thing you have to remember, there is many people in this world that have still not got access to yoga, and they still haven't found their teacher, right? So, and they're still seeking their teacher. And so new teachers, like, have this online, like, space that not only gets them to, like, in their local area, but you've got visibility across the whole world. You know, when you go on the online platform. So there's options. And, you know, I've always like have been the person always have been like, where is the light in this? Where can I find the light? Okay, let me just think, instead of it always being so like, nobody wants me to teach. Oh, I can't get any classes. Oh, it's just saturated market. Well, that's what you're going to attract, right?
Yeah.
So if you have that mindset, you're also going to like attract like that. And that's kind of like yogic thinking, right? Is the sense that like we are not our mind. We want to calm the fluctuations of the mind. And if you're going, I'm not a good teacher, no one's coming to my classes, you're just feeding more and more and more into that mindset. And then that's what you're gonna that's kind of what will come back to you. So, and I'm not saying it's easy. Like I 100% like know, and I hear a lot from new teachers, and I know getting your foot in the door. One of the good things to do is like go and see if you can set up a class. If you've got a job and you're working in an office, set up a class in the company that you work for. My teammates were like absolutely over the moon when I qualified as a teacher. They were like, oh, and they know me, so they felt safe, right? So they felt safe to do yoga and do all these weird shapes in the office. And so I set up like yoga classes. So this is like, you've got all these like little like doors, but you've just got to like look at these doors, and some doors are really small, but once you open it, it's like whoosh, there's some opportunity.
Yeah, looking past the studio and exactly what you said, looking into your community, who's around you, that you could start teaching instead of having your I guess ambitions set on like working at the biggest studio right away.
Yeah. And I think like, back when I trained, it was like, can I mention yoga studios, or are we not allowed to? Yeah. Well, back when in my day, it was like, you've got to be at Try Yoga. That was the place to be. Like, that is like, hey, you have made it as a yoga teacher. And that's kind of where, but now we don't have that, right? Like things have like changed in that. And there is some studios that have this kind of like real strong branding. You're kind of like, hey, that's a studio I want to get to, go to. And if you connect with them, then do it, give it a go. In that, but I think like I just remember when I trained, it was like that's where you kind of want to be. And if you got in, it was like, wow, you've made it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a little bit different these days.
Yeah, it's very different, and that studio is very different now. So there's a lot of change in the industry, not only in terms of like teachers, but also like yoga studios, and they have been put under the spotlight. Yeah, way more ever. Ever than what they've ever been before, because teachers are also way more vocal than what they were. When I trained, you wouldn't even question what your salary was. You would be like, hey, is that the rate? Oh, okay, yeah. But I've been given the opportunity to teach, so therefore that's great. But now, like, teachers are a little bit more, hey, new teachers, and I think great, you've got a voice, like, do it. It's like they're a bit more vocal about how much they want to earn, and like, and also a bit more vocal around what does your yoga studio stand for? Like, what are you what's your intention behind the studio? So I think before pandemic, I think studios, it was like studios and teachers were underneath the studios. That's kind of like the model. You work for the studios. Pandemic happened, the studios were there, so were the teachers. Things changed. The landscape completely changed, because basically people were coming to their teachers, not to the studio. So there was this sense of oh, okay, right, I can teach yoga on my own without being under the umbrella of a studio, which I never thought I could. Because I thought that was the only way that I would be able to teach is through the umbrella of a studio. And I think when the pandemic hit, it was an interesting space to be in the yoga industry, because teachers had way more power. in that space. And especially if you were teaching for a long time, and everything always happens, nothing happens by chance. These things happen for a reason. And I remember 2 years before the pandemic hit, I remember this because Davina and I used to cover a lot of classes in this studio. Like, we were really present. Like, we would show up, we would turn up, we would teach our classes. We would come early. I would come early. I would chat to people, get to know people. I would stay after a class, get to know people. And that was just what I saw as part and parcel of, like, half of that is me. That's what I'm like. So when I work somewhere, like, I show up early, but me showing up early in these situations was me, like, connecting with people. And I didn't have that intention, but that's how it started to, like, work. So I was doing that for 2 years, and what I didn't realize I was doing whilst I was, like, in that space of teaching and connecting with people, I was building a community. So when it came to the pandemic, I had this community that I was serving for 2 years that were, like, coming to my classes online without being under the umbrella of a studio. And so, like, that's when I realized, I was like, oh, okay, right. Okay, I didn't realize people came to my class because they enjoyed the class. I just thought they came to class. I didn't literally, when people go, oh, I didn't even associate numbers or wait lists or anything in that space of time. I was doing my thing. I was like, teaching yoga, like, serving my community. And then, like, when the pandemic hit, I realized how many people that I had served and how many people then started to show up to my own kind of classes in that space. And that's when I realized, oh, okay, I can do stuff on my own. I don't necessarily need to be under the umbrella of a studio in that space. So and that for me was, like, quite a turn for me in my career, in that I had this whole avenue of, like, online things that I could explore and dive into.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what you can teach now to new teachers, that you can be, it's a power shift, and then you can be your own person. So I think it's very good that we now see this. And what do you think about, like, where yoga is headed at the moment with all the shift and all the, like, big multi-billionaire business of, like, people opening studios all the time, and sometimes yoga is not accessible to people because it's getting so expensive. And also all this yoga of, like, puppy yoga, goat yoga, Jin yoga. It feels like such a shift in yoga world.
Like gimmicks and corporatization of everything.
But, like, that again, that questioning and that spotlight happened around the pandemic time. That's when these like, there was some, like, hey, okay, this is this industry, like, okay, all of a sudden we're talking about things like, oh, cultural appropriation. Okay, all right then. Okay, so I see. Okay, are we, like, losing the essence of the practice because we've solely moved it into a physical practice? So these conversations were not being had, like, 10 odd years ago, So we're like now, like, questioning a lot of things, and it's a really good place for us to be in, because I think the way yoga was going, if the pandemic didn't happen and various things within that didn't happen, we wouldn't be having these conversations that we're having. And then these conversations need to happen, like, now, and we need to talk about it, because I take my role as a yoga teacher very seriously, and I take my role as a teacher trainer very seriously, and because yoga means a lot to me. Like, I'm, like, fully passionate about yoga, and I think, like, in order for yoga to continue past my lifetime, when I leave, and it carries on and it continues to, like, heal people, to help people, to give people space, to give people peace, we need to just step back and be like, hey, let's look at how like yoga is portrayed in the Western world now, in this modern world, and are we losing the essence of the practice because we're so focused on the physical? But the physical is a very big part of yoga. It is the first thing we're trying to do is tap into our body, right? So therefore the physical practice is really key for us to like get through this shell, this outer layer, making the outer layer giving space. That's all we're doing in yoga, is we're always trying to create space, whether that's in the body, whether that's in the mind. So I'm trying to create that space. So I've got like some peace in my body and peace like in my mind. And that's what we're always trying to do, is like create space and create peace. But if we're solely focusing on the physical practice, but then taking the physical practice out of context, and then it's looking like you should look like this in the poses. Hey, you should be doing these type of poses. Are those things creating space in your body, in your mind, in your heart? Or is it actually causing more tension because you're not achieving these perfect poses that you're seeing? So I think like these questions that we are like exploring and have been exploring the last kind of 2-3 years are really key. And I think as yoga teachers, like, you've got to take a responsibility, because you're feeding into the industry, right? So, and I always say to yoga teachers on our teacher training, like, we have such a good conversation, and we talk about like, let's talk about the industry. What is light about our industry? What is light about the wellness industry? What is light about yoga, right? But everything has a dark side. It's just the way it is. There's always a dark side, and there's a dark side to yoga. And the dark side of yoga, is that, okay, are we taking the practice and have we watered down the practice? Are we not even acknowledging where this practice has come from? Like, do you know the history? Do you know the history of this practice? Every teacher training should be doing a history, because if you don't know where something has come from, how can you honor a practice if you don't know the history of something, right? And the history of yoga is complicated. And the thing is, in the Western world, we love to put dates in order, everything in chronicle order. We don't necessarily have that, which is where the complication can come into the history, like, of yoga. We've got periods of time that we know certain things like have happened. So I think first for me is like, we have to look back at where teachers are getting trained and what message they are being given during their training, because that's like a starting point for you to go out and teach. So, I think that has led into conversations around like who's teaching on teacher training. So I literally, as soon as I started to delve into teacher trainings, I took the role really seriously, because I was like, okay, I'm going to start sharing these teachings with students, so I need to just make sure I know my stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, because it's a responsibility, and it's made me learn. It's made me study more. It's made me more curious, and it's made me question, like, should we say namaste at the end of the class? Because that's what I've always been trained to say at the end of my class. And so these are the things that we're just being a bit more questioning around. And so we should. In order for us to keep yoga and keep letting it serve people, giving people the freedom in their mind, in their bodies, that we need to make sure as yoga teachers, you have a responsibility for this. If you just teach it solely as a physical practice, and you can teach it solely as a physical practice, but if you're teaching it in a way that is like body shaming somebody, is making somebody feel like they can't do something, and is like, then you're like pumping in the class, hey, it's a 5, 6, 7, 8 downward dog, here we go, pump, pump, pump. That's not what yoga's about. You can still teach and be a yoga teacher and teach a physical practice if you're not connected to any other parts of it, but you can teach a physical practice in a mindful way where you're explaining to students that you're moving. When you're moving, the breath is moving. We're working towards creating peace on the inside. It's very different, right? The two different kind of ways of like teaching a physical practice. And teaching it in a way where you're making students feel like they don't have the body shape in order to do these shapes that you're asking. If you're teaching it in a way that is not accessible, you are moving that person, you think about it, you're moving that person away from their own body. And that's not what yoga is about. It's about bringing you closer to your body, and it's about you connecting to your body. And if you keep pulling your students away, then that's not yoga. You know, this is my view on it.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a real rant. Sorry.
That's okay. You just made me think about like so many things that have happened recently in conversations with students about what you just said. Like keeping the authenticity of the practice and where it came from. Like I tend to speak in Sanskrit a lot and make it very clear this is the name of the posture. And, you know, I say this because the practice was developed in Sanskrit, came from India, and we need to honor its roots and traditions. And someone came up to me yesterday and she's like, oh, I didn't know what you were talking about in any of the postures because I don't know Sanskrit. And I like had to explain, you know, this is why I teach like that. I explain how to do the postures, but it was an advanced class, so I would have the expectation that if you're coming to that class, you have experience in yoga, and you should have heard the Sanskrit words by that point. And then also I know some teachers who just like don't bother to learn the Sanskrit, and it really bothers me because it just kind of like, oh, they're like, well, nobody understands it anyway. I'm like, but it's your responsibility to teach them. You're a teacher. And that's part of the history of the practice. And then I was just also having a conversation with a student this week about a teacher. She has a really strong practice. And she came up to me after and she's like, oh, this teacher told me my triangle posture was wrong. Like after class, like took the liberty to tell this person who has a strong practice, I would never correct her triangle posture because she looks like she knows what she's doing. She's like, well, I was told this was wrong and it should be like this. And I'm like, well, what does that feel like to you in your body? Like, what action are you getting out of this pose? What direction are you moving your breath in? Because that's what you want to consider when you're in a posture, not like your hip needs to be rolled in versus out. Versus out, because then you're making it too physical. You're not making it about the energetic and the breath, and giving you the opportunity to question what you feel and become your own teacher and observe for yourself.
It's, you know, it's because we are like obsessed with perfection, and we want to like do everything right and do it correctly. You know, and so then, you know, when someone comes up to you and says, hey, your triangle pose is not looking like how it should do, or whatever the words they use, and then that person's like, oh yeah, you've corrected me, so you've like, you know, and then it just kind of feeds into, again, that kind of stuff feeds more into the way a pose looks, as opposed to connecting people to a feeling of a pose. And it's really challenging because, you know, you do have a role as a teacher to guide your students, guide them through the asana practice. Like there's and you've got to give them the cues around that in order for them to like get to that shape. But it's finding the right balance of giving a cue and then giving like a feeling. And then like the Sanskrit in classes, it's, you know, it's the language of yoga, and it's also a vibrational language. So when you are saying Sanskrit in your classes, it is landing on your cells of your body, and it's vibrational, so it lands in a certain way. And all of these things, again, like moving the breath work, everything is about creating that like kind of space on the inside, that sense of freedom and the peace on the inside. So Sanskrit is like adds into that as well. So you only can share what is right for you, Ashley. Like I say, like if it's your thing and it comes from you, your heart, you want to share with it, you want to honor the practice, then do it and continue on your journey. And I have, like, you know, when I'm on teacher trainings, I encourage teachers to like teach from what lands with them. And maybe in this point in time, Sanskrit is not landing with them, right? Maybe in a year's time it will, maybe, but know that it's the language of yoga. And know that like it will add some depth, some richness into your classes. But it's got to come from a space of the heart. Don't see it as a tick box exercise. Tick, I use Sanskrit. That's ticking it. I'm looking after the roots of yoga. Da da da. If it's not in your heart, then you can't teach it.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
It's interesting way. I think it's a good way of seeing it, because when I finished my teacher training, I was quite young, and I was like, I finished this. I was confident about it because we had very good support system with my teacher training. But when I went to classes and I heard people talking about philosophy and all this, lots of knowledge, and I always said to myself that I like listening to it. I love these kind of classes, but I don't think I can teach that because I don't feel like I'm the big wisdom, carrying of the wisdom yet. So I was just like, and as years I grew as a teacher, now I talk more about philosophy and I feel I embody it more. So I'm confident to share it. But in the beginning, I was focusing on just delivering a class, driving people back to their breath and how they feel. And now I'm like, now I understand more, so I can share more. So I think it comes with years, how you evolve.
100%. It comes with time. When you first come out of a teacher training school, you've got to just you're literally want to like get your students from A to B, right? Like it's literally what I did. I literally remember putting the lights on and I went, "Hello everyone, I'm Sunita," and I was like downward dog, like literally. I just was like, and I didn't look at any student. I didn't know what they were doing. I had no idea. All I needed to get them to was to Shavasana. I was like, I need to get them to this final stage. And then when it was over, my whole body was like, and I curled up in a ball. I was exhausted. Like I literally, who knows what anyone was doing in that class. And so that's the thing that you have to be mindful for, is that, like, you know, if you look at the lineage of yoga and the teachers like that, like have brought this to the West, they didn't nail it in a year. You know, they've been studying and studying and studying and studying and, you know, and slowly. And I always say that to teachers, what is the rush? Like, learn the skill first to teach. You don't have to do all of it. You know, you learn the skill to teach. Once you've mastered that, maybe there's something in your heart that you go, oh, do you know what? I really want to share something on philosophy. Then take your time, study it. If you're not connected to things, it's not going to land. And that's when when people say, oh, be authentic, this is what being authentic is. Like, teach from what is landing to you, teach how you're connecting to the practice, and teach that. That's the place you want to be. When I first started, I didn't teach philosophy. I was too worried about my left and right and remembering the sequence.
Yeah.
I literally used to think, oh my God, I'd remember practicing in the kitchen. It's high lunge. From high lunge, I'm going to go warrior two. From warrior two, I'm going to flip, and then I'm going to reverse. Okay, then hands back down. And then the next, like, you know, as time went, then I was like, I need to master sun salutations. Then I'm like, okay, did I do the left leg? And literally, this is the journey of this, you know. So I think we have to be careful of not being like, hey, as a teacher, you should do this. I think teach first what lands to yourself, and then slowly build and grow from that space. And you might be an asana teacher, you might be a physical practice teacher, because the rest doesn't land with you. But just think about how much peace a physical practice can bring you. It's, even though it's only 20% of yoga, it still brings enough peace. And in a world that is troubled, and the stresses that we all have, if as a yoga teacher you can just create a little bit of peace in your student's mind or in their heart or in their body, then I feel like you've done your job, you know. And if they come back the next day and that piece goes from here to goes a little bit bigger, then you've done your job. If your students are walking out your classes going, I feel awful about myself, I feel like I'm not good at yoga, then you need to question what are you doing as a teacher. I think that to me is more important than anything else. Is our job is to like hold the space, hold it in a way that your students feel safe, that your students feel welcome. So this is when, like, clicks, you come into these spaces and you've got the clicks, and the teacher gets involved in the clicks as well. And I've been in studios when that has happened, and I'm just like, I don't have space for that. I don't have time for that. Like, as a yoga teacher, look at all your students and welcome every single student. And this is when the conversation comes in, is that people feel like they're not welcome in a yoga space. And it's because the teacher is too busy clicking around with the cool gang. And it's like, serve your students and serve every single one to the best of your ability. And I think that's really, really important that we do that. People like the idea of the yoga teacher, like being the cool yoga teacher, oh yeah, I meditate and have my green juice. And, it's very easy to kind of like play the role. You can play that role. But are you a real teacher? You want to be a real role model. So, your students must love this. When I say to my students, oh my God, my hips are so tight, this is as much as I can get in this fold, there'll always be somebody that comes up to me after class and is like, I'm so glad you said that about your hips. I'm so glad you said that you don't do a handstand. Make yourself a real role model. And clicks, I don't have the space to even talk about it, because I just don't have any kind of time for that kind of stuff. I'm like, everybody comes, you open your arms out to every single person that comes to your class, and you do your best. You do your best. That's all you can do. Some students, come and you haven't caught up with them, you haven't had time to chat with them, but that's all you can do, is do your best and create that space for your students.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Make everyone feel welcome, that they belong there, that their presence is noted, that they have the freedom to explore their body and move in a way that feels beneficial and good for them, so they leave the class feeling nurtured and better.
Yeah, and that's like, and also that what feeds, to me, what also is one of the things in the yoga industry is the lack of diversity. So, and that's not just in terms of race. Like, most spaces that I, have been in, there's no diversity, very little diversity. And there's like, so that's one thing that puts people off, because they can't see somebody that is similar to them. And then not only race, but gender. It's a very female heavy industry. And then age diversity, right? Like, it's a very young industry. And then size diversity, right? So, there's a particular shape of person that kind of teaches yoga. So we've got so what we need to have in yoga is more like diversity in many different ways, which then will attract people, because it will be like, oh, I can see myself here. I can see myself in this space. And I think that's like really something that we kind of need to work on. And if you are like I'm very conscious of it on teacher training, and I'm conscious of like who my team, the makeup of the teaching team, I'm very aware of it. And I know what I need to do or to kind of grow that and make that a little bit more diverse. And I take responsibility for that. Like, I think it's important because I care about that. And I think if you are if you head up a yoga school, you want to think about what the makeup of your faculty is and who are you getting to deliver. Is it a diverse team? What female representation have you got versus male kind of representation? And like, look at how you can diversify. If you're a studio manager, this is really important. If you're a studio manager, like, look at the makeup of your teachers. Have you got all females? Have you all got white teachers? Is there any diversity? And go out and seek people and find your teachers. Otherwise you're like, oh, it's all love and light. It's like, mate, is it love and light at your studio, or we just got like one type of person that is teaching? And you just bury your head like under the sand with this kind of stuff. And I think one of the things that for me in yoga has really been something that I've like welcomed is the fact that we can talk about this. You know, I was preparing for this catch up with you both, and about like 10 years ago or maybe longer, I put up something on my Instagram, and it was something along the lines like, oh, I don't see anybody from my culture, from my background in yoga, but I did it in such a subtle way, in the sense I was very mindful of the words I was using. And, you know, but now I can be like, hey, I can say more like, hey, it's females. There's a lot of white yoga teachers, and that's great. I'm not saying that's a wrong thing, but the balance isn't right. Okay, that's what we're seeking, is more balance in that. And I think, like, if you are, you know, heading up teacher trainings, if you are studio owners, if you organize festivals, whatever, like, look at it from that point. Like, look at it from that point of view, is, have I got a diverse point? And, you know, that will really kind of, I think, how I always just think about in yoga, like, you know, how can I leave this world in a better place when I leave? How can I imprint something? And, you know, like, I want to leave like yoga in a place where like it stays it will evolve, of course, but we don't lose what the essence is about this sense of creating peace on the inside, and that we can attract more people that are, especially those that don't think yoga is for them, that they can come to these spaces. And I think that's kind of, for me, that's like really important. And, you know, I'm like, one of the things that like does wind me up is like, oh yeah, we're listening, I'm here to listen. It's like, okay, can we move from listening to taking some action now? Because I'm not going to tell you again about cultural appropriation. I'm not going to tell you again about how you can, like, you know, puppy yoga and all of these different things. Like, you know about it now, right? So what are you going to do about it? How are you going to act on it? And that's where the space we need to move from. So you need to move from listening, which is important, but then you as an individual, what can you act on in all of these spaces? And like in yoga, like, where are you taking action and what is important to you?
Yeah, I think it's good to put it that way, that from listening we're moving to taking action, because this is where we need to be. And in diversity, I remember with my modeling agencies that with diversity, I think we should also watch out for not just ticking boxes, that we need to have all these kind of people, just like actually finding people who are fitting into the team and serving their purpose. But also, I remember in my modeling agency, they were like, oh, my friend applies for them. They're like, oh, we already have a ginger girl, so we don't need another one. Oh, we already have a gap tooth girl. It's like, well, then again, it's like, you tick the box that you already had that one kind of person, so I don't need any more. Which is, again, a very bad way of looking at it. So you just, on the surface, you like you're diverse and accepting people, but then you're just ticking boxes and then moving on.
Yeah.
Like them making a person a token.
Yeah, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's really, it's very hard, it's difficult, but it requires like effort, and everything requires effort. In order to change, you have to kind of put some effort into this. But the tick box exercise, I get asked, I don't now, but I did initially, especially when, and this is the interesting thing, because, with the industry, it's like, it was a hot topic, cultural appropriation. And then all of a sudden I had people reaching out to me going, hey, would you like to come and teach for our studio? I'm like, do you know anything about me? Do you want to know where I train? Do you want to know what my interest is or anything? Like, get to know me. And then those questions, Melinda, exactly that. Oh, do they fit in the team? Oh, I think they will really fit in the team because they offer this, or they're interested in this. So it's like, when people do this tick box thing, it's like, well, first, why don't you get to know the individual? Because I might not necessarily be a fit. So don't recruit me just for the colour of my skin, but recruit me because I'm a fit for what you're trying to like do and what you're trying to get. So I think the bit that I think gets missed out is the bit where they go, hey, tell me a bit about you, because on my socials you will know a bit about me, but you wouldn't know anything else about that. You wouldn't know where I trained, or like what other trainings that I've done, and what I am trying to achieve in yoga, all of that. So I think just kind of like getting to know and like building a network of relationships with like yoga teachers, and getting to know them, and then thinking how actually they're a real right fit for what we're trying to do.
But it's not just stays on a surface level, but you actually care to sort of
like find out a bit, and then we'll take the relationship like from there. But if you're just going to reach out to me and go, hey, we're looking for some more, I mean, literally the thing that you can like goes wrong is, hey, I'm just looking for a bit more diversity, so I was wondering if you can come onto our festival. Okay, all right, yeah.
I think
yeah,
with the male student, like male teachers as well, because I remember one of my male friends was saying that I just get into studios because they don't have any male teachers. It's like, it's just so random. But you should not just hire someone because they are male or because they have different
I know, and it's tricky. It's tricky, but I think like making effort towards that and moving towards that. And, like, it's so great to have diversity, isn't it? Like, at Hot Pod, I'm like working with like Nick, and it's really nice to work with a male energy, it's really lovely to have a different energy, a different perspective, a different view, and like you can kind of challenge each other and you can grow like within those kind of like conversations. So it's really nice just to work with different people that come from different backgrounds. Everything adds so much, and you can like flourish and grow like within that, because you're bringing in all these different views, perspectives, and people from different kind of backgrounds, different cultures, and so forth, different ages. So
you learn from each other. I think on retreats, when we have some conversations in the evenings, and people tell about how they were brought up and what they do at home, and their little ceremonies or things they do. And it's just so interesting because everyone came from such a different walk of life, different ages, different countries. And actually, we really like that because we both came from a different country, but we all live in the UK and going into Greece to practice yoga together. And we are all so different. And it's just so interesting just to hear all the different stories.
Oh, it's so lovely. It's so nice to like have that, and that is what yoga is about, like connection. And you are connecting, we are disconnecting in this world, but yoga connects us. Like, that's I mean, retreats are just like magical. That time that you spend like getting to get to know your students, and the connections that you make are like something else.
Definitely.
I just remembered we didn't cover what brought you to yoga. You said you started 20 odd years ago. What brought you to start?
actually, what brought me to yoga, so I've always done, when I left university, I started to like go to the gym and do treadmill, and then I do like kind of like classes like body pump and boot camp classes, all sorts of classes, and I just was really kind of into like my fitness. And actually in the gym, they had a class, and they don't have these anymore, but it was called body balance back then. And so basically that was a combo of like Pilates and yoga together. And you know, back then I didn't question it, but now I question that combo. But anyway, that's past now, I can't do anything about it. But anyway, the point is that that's where I started, and actually then it just started to like evolve, and I used to do more and more yoga, and like I found various different styles, and then just I started to understand and connect with the teachers that I was practicing with at that time, and the Ashtanga teacher, and I kind of started to connect to a deeper, I thought, oh, there's a deeper level to this practice. And then my own heritage and my own upbringing and the rituals and things that we were brought up on, there was this like, I can't explain it, like it just all kind of just sat really nicely together. And so my initial entry was, Ashley, to answer your question, was through body balance, and then over the years and over time, and then just like, you know, how we were brought up in certain rituals that my mum and dad did, kind of also I saw that coming into yoga. So it was just really nice because it was kind of really organic. And so from that space, I just continued, and I used to love going to yoga, you know, like love going to a class. Like it would be like, if I don't make it to yoga, there's going to be a problem for the rest of the day. You know, it's that kind of, it was that like the thing is, in the Western world, we need the science, but like, I just didn't need the science. I was like, this Eastern like medicine that has come down, it's an intuitive practice, and intuitively I feel better than what I did when I came in, you know. And then I was like, I just wanted more of it. I was like, oh my God, then getting into the styles, and you know, I really love, like, you know, when you go to a really good class, like everything, like the movement, the practice, just everything, like in that, like I say I used to it, I love that. And the reason I use the word used to it is just that my practice looks very like different now. I'm very more steady in my practice. I'm like, you know, I've had some things happening in my own personal life, and I never experienced yoga as a healing tool, if I'm honest, because I came through fitness and I came through enjoying something. And then I've had, as life will throw all of us, these curveballs. And then when these curveballs come, you start to understand, or, you know, how yoga can heal you, whether that's a loss in your heart because someone has left and you want to heal and you want to process. And so something happens between moving, breathing on the four corners of your mat. Something happens that everything just comes a little bit back into a little bit more space of, I feel better than what I did when I came in. I'm still grieving, but I feel a little bit better, you know. And then you just keep going back, and then, you know, eventually you find a new version of yourself in some way, because that loss, or that whatever you've experienced in your life that's caused pain, has kind of passed, but it's kind of left you feeling same but different. But the practice does that, you know, the practice does that. And as I've got older, I was brought up with strong faith, and so when I practice now, I always practice up, because I know there's something more bigger than me. I'm yoking, or something more above me. And so that kind of is really for me where I find a lot of like space and a lot of peace is in knowing that what is like above me and that I'm part of something more is because we are, right, we're not our bodies, we're something more,
we're part of something bigger,
and so but this is why I love yoga, because I think like there is you can go from the physical and you can move into different layers of it. It starts with the body, and then you can go into all the different layers and deeper layers of yourself, if that's what is your calling, right? We can't be critical of people and be like, oh, they just do a physical practice and that's it. It's like, well, maybe only they know what they get out of it. But if you want to go deeper and connect deeper, there is more to it, if that's what the calling is, and like to be able to, and that's what yogis were doing. They were just sitting, exploring in forests, like that. Everything is inside of us, but we need to become still in order to hear that, to know, and come back to this state of our true kind of like nature. But that requires you to go beyond the practice. It requires you to become still and sit with ourselves. And we're not very good at sitting with ourselves, And that's the thing, in yoga studios, that's how the structure of classes are. Like, they kind of separate things, like they have like yoga styles, all the classes. Then now as time has gone on, you'll see like, oh, this is a meditation class, there's a meditation. And then you have like, oh, this is a pranayama class. But actually, we put all three together. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but oh my God, to sit after asana practice, you do your pranayama, you sit, and to sit and be in that space is the gem, But what do? We like do shavasana, we come up, we cross, we like, close the practice, and it's like, boom, out the door. How about if I sit just for a minute? And everything is like in a space of integration. Can I just sit? Because that's how yoga was like, that we, in order for us to be able to sit and become still, like to put that in. And that's kind of like definitely where I have moved in my own teaching, is to get people to become a little bit more still. And even if it's just a minute, and I still get people that like are like sitting there looking at me like, really, come on, I need to get to work. I've got to go. And that's fine. But this is important to me. If you can sit for a minute, the world can wait. And then you can go about your day,
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what I think is missing, I think, is that bit at the end of the practice where we can get people to meditate, and we kind of put it out in isolation. And actually, if you do it after an asana practice, you do your pranayama, then you sit. That's a really nice kind of way of kind of completing that practice, so you can go about your day.
Yeah. Well, it's like the type of yoga that I started practicing in Canada. We did like a physical practice and then shavasana for about 60 minutes, and then pranayama and meditation. And I just like, learning yoga is an evolution. You learn through your body, and then you're like, oh, why do I have to do this breathing stuff? Why do I have to sit here and meditate? And then because I just stayed because they were doing it in the class and I didn't want to get up and leave, I started to see, how powerful it was. And once you like get into a place where your body can sit more comfortably and you can do that, you really see the powerful of just dropping into that space and that peace. But there is a long period of time where you're training yourself to be able to get there. And then that's where like, philosophy of the deeper layers of yourself come into the koshas, and the physical layer into the breath, the prana, the mind, intuition, inner self. But you have to start from the out and go in and what do they say? Like, it's like peeling away at an onion. You have to start with the outer.
Yeah.
And you can't fault anyone for starting with their physical body and loving the physical practice because it's a conduit to getting there.
Yes, 100%. And that's it. And, you know, there's some days I practice and I don't go past my body.
Yeah.
Because my hips are like on my hamstrings or my quads. And there's the conversation, the dialogue in my head is just like, oh my God, my body's so tight. Oh my, this is happening. And that's where the space that I'm in, like all the time, you know, or sometimes in my practice. And then sometimes I'm in a different like space. So, and I don't think there's anything wrong in sitting in that space, or like if you go deeper, you can go like deeper. And I think like my yoga is not better than your yoga.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's only, you know, what is creating peace. And sometimes I don't want to sit with my eyes closed because my mind's a bit disturbed. Or I've got something on my mind, and literally I don't want to sit with my eyes closed. I think I just need to go have a strong yoga practice just to move for a bit, you know, and that's okay. Yeah.
There's no right and there's no wrong.
This is it. Exactly. So, yeah.
But
I
coming back to, you know, our role as teachers is like creating that space where we can give people the tools to do that self-inquiry and understand that there's more going on than just the physical asana. But it's so powerful anyway, like the physical asana, I hope that just it makes an amazing place for people to go forward out into the rest of their day from, regardless.
Exactly. That's it. Like, you know, there's a reset has been, like, there's been a bit of a reset in their day. They've been on the mat and we've hit like a reset. I think we just have to not preach.
Yeah.
And like make sure that like we are like everything's an offering, you know, and people have that exploration, that like so that they can dive in and explore within themselves without kind of the teacher preaching throughout the practice. So it's just finding I think finding that right kind of tuning of that is really important. And it's really natural when you come out of a teacher training because you want to preach because you just learn a load of stuff, you know. It's really normal. It's normal. And, you know, you want people to be like, you do down dog like this because that's how I've learned it. You know, that's how it is. And so, you know, eventually these things start to like to knock away, but like it takes time, you know. And my sister always says to me, always go back to when you were on your teacher training. Always go back to what you were like when you were on your teacher training, and remind yourself of what it is like to be back in that space. But
it's true. Thank you very much. I think it's quite a lot of food for thought and a lot of things that we can reflect on. And is there anything else you wanted to share or ask?
No, nothing. I've loved kind of talking to you both. It's funny, isn't it? Because when someone asks you to do a podcast, you go, well, I've got nothing to say. And as soon as it, like someone, then you start talking, you realise, oh, actually, I have got a fair bit to say. So I feel like, firstly, like, thank you for like giving me a platform, for me to like really share my views and my thoughts, and for listening. Like, it's been really lovely actually to when you do things like this and you start talking, which is really great, why the work that you're both doing about putting a podcast together, because you start to realize what is important to you in yoga and what isn't so important to you. So it really starts to, so a conversation is so powerful, and it kind of really gets you to go, oh, okay, actually I do feel strongly about that. I didn't realize I did, but clearly I do. Or no, I don't feel about that. So yeah, so that's kind of and that's been really great to be in that space. I'm sure there's going to be a few posts now on me because you've planted seeds in my head of things that I feel strongly about. But yeah, so thank you both for having me. It's been lovely to chat to you both.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you.